Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is gonna be a very long video. I'm probably gonna cut it down into a few parts. So this, I guess, will be part one. So this is a very important topic, and it's unfortunate how the LGBTQ mentality is being forced upon everyone. And it's even more sad how so many Muslims have decided to support LGBTQ and their causes. So, I'm just going to say this right off the bat. So, LGBTQ, it's a very Eurocentric ideology. It's a Eurocentric ideology really created by entitled white liberal people, and it's being pushed upon everyone. So I live in Canada. I live in a major Canadian city. I graduated high school in 2011, and the city that I live in, it's fairly liberal and progressive and open-minded and stuff like that. But there was nothing about LGBTQ taught in our schools. There was no LGBTQ alliance. They have these clubs in high school now called LGBTQ Alliance and stuff like that. So I graduated in 2011 high school, and there was nothing like that in my school. Up until my last year of university, so I graduated university in 2016. Same thing there. Hardly any LGBTQ stuff around anywhere. And university is even more liberal, right? It's even more open-minded and progressive. And still, up until 2016, there was hardly any LGBTQ clubs or mentions anywhere. I had to take as a part of my majors, I had to take sociology, and a lot of sociology classes now, they heavily deal with LGBTQ causes, but there was nothing like that in my classes. My textbook, my professors, my class notes, nothing about LGBTQ, nothing. And again, I live in a very liberal Canadian city. And that just goes to show how LGBTQ, it was completely considered to be nonsense and abnormal up until so recently. From 2016 onwards, there was a massive explosion of LGBTQ content everywhere. In TV shows, in movies, advertisements. It was being pushed by politicians, liberal politicians. And now, unfortunately, it's also being pushed heavily in schools. More specifically, children's schools. There is pride flags flying in elementary schools now. This never existed when I went to elementary. In my liberal Canadian city, there was no LGBTQ flag flying anywhere. And now it's being targeted upon children. There was no such thing as pronouns and preferred pronouns when I was growing up. I didn't even hear about this until I started working, which was in the late 2010s. There was nothing but pronouns and your preferred pronouns and gender expression and gender and identity when I was in university as well. Nothing like that. 10, 15, 20 years ago, if I went into my classroom, saying I'm non-binary, using they, them pronouns, do you know how bad I would be laughed at by my classmates, by my white liberal classmates? Do you know how badly I would be bullied for being weird and strange by these white liberal kids? Because there was no LGBTQ back then, and it was completely considered to be nonsense if anyone brought it up. Again, 10, 15, 20 years ago, if anyone went to class in elementary or junior high or high school or even in university and said, you know what, I am non-binary, I am trans, I use they them pronouns, these kids, they would be bullied so quickly, not only by the students but by teachers as well. They'd be considered to be abnormal. And you just see how quickly times have changed, unfortunately. We went from seeing this deranged, perverted cult of LGBTQ. It went from being, considered to be abnormal and nonsense to openly being accepted and promoted and pushed upon children. Look how quickly it happened. The purpose of religion is to suppress your desires, right? Even if they're natural, you have to suppress them. If I'm naturally attracted to women, I still have to suppress those desires, because the only way I can express those desires is through marriage. Anything outside of that, it's wrong. Everyone should check out Yasser Qadi and Shabir Ali's arguments on this. Their videos are up on YouTube. You can just search it up. Marriage between a Muslim man and a Muslim woman, it's the only acceptable thing in Islam when it comes to marriage. Nothing outside of this is allowed. No dating, no incest, no bestiality, nothing. Doesn't matter if you're attracted to your own family, doesn't matter if you're attracted to animals, doesn't matter if you're attracted to objects. The only normal thing in Islam is marriage between a man and a woman. So you have to control your desires. This is the purpose of Islam. You have to control your desires. Not engaging in desires is what Islam teaches. You can only engage in those desires through appropriate channels, and that's through marriage. Okay, see, I as a Muslim male, I can't ask out these women on dates and have sex with them. It doesn't matter how strong my desire is. It has to be suppressed. So you can use the same logic here if you are Muslim and you support LGBTQ, or if you're part of it. You gotta suppress your desires. You have to give allegiance to the 1400-year Muslim identity that your ancestors had. So if you identify as a Zayzim, Fae, Femme, whatever, non-binary, whatever, you are not pledging allegiance to your ancestors who had a Muslim identity for 1400 years. One argument for LGBTQ is they say that gay people, they're forced, gay people and lesbian people and non-binary people, whatever, they say that they're forced to live a double life. They're forced to live a double life because their true self, they can't express it. That's the main argument made in favor of LGBTQ, is that they're forced to live inside their closet, and they're forced to live their identity that they don't want. That they can show that publicly, but they can't show their true selves. This is the main argument by LGBTQ. So the thing is that the same can be said for straight people who are who are married and they're attracted to other people. Should they act on those desires because their true self is to, date and marry and have sex the people who aren't married to them? Should they act on those desires? They also push something called, you're supposed to experiment with your sexuality. You're supposed to question your sexuality. We're not supposed to do that in Islam. And we never did this when I was growing up either. As I mentioned already, I live in a very liberal Canadian city, and there was no LGBTQ anywhere. There was no idea that, you have to experiment with your sexuality. None of that existed. So you can put religion aside and see how LGBTQ was considered to be so abnormal back when I was growing up, which wasn't even that long ago. I like 2015, 2016 was the last of the normal era, and then it just went completely downhill from there. It's like from 2016 and beyond, the LGBTQ has taken a stranglehold of everything and everyone. Prior to that, they were mostly suppressed. Because even in this white liberal society we live in, 10, 15, 20 years ago, LGBTQ was not accepted openly. Many of our favorite shows growing up, um, on Nickelodeon in the 90s and early 2000s, and popular shows that everyone knows about, like The Office, Friends, How I Met Your Mother, Parks and Rec, Saturday Night Live, King of Queens, Seinfeld, so on and so on. All of these shows in the 90s and early 2000s and mid-late 2000s, if you watch them and pay attention, you can see how much fun they make of the LGBTQ community. You can see how much fun they make of them. You can see how they poke fun at them, how they try and tease them. Because not that long ago, LGBTQ was seen as abnormal. All of our favorite shows growing up, they never really had LGBTQ characters, and if they did, they would be seen as abnormal. I just off the top of my head, there was that show Drake and Josh, popular show. There is just some scenes that stand out in my head now because these scenes would not be able to exist today. There's a scene of a father having to wear a woman's dress, and you can see how his own kids bully him. You can see how he's made fun of. You can see how the laugh track laughs at him. Because it was abnormal for men to dress like this. And it was normal to make fun of them if you saw them. You can always find anti-LGBTQ content in really famous shows from the 80s and 90s and late 2000s. Where they just make fun of LGBTQ people. And now, of course, you can't do that. Shows nowadays, they have LGBTQ characters, and it's being pushed, their ideology is being pushed upon everyone. You guys should check out Matt Walsh, and he covers a lot of this on a daily basis. He covers, he has on his daily video upload that he does, he shows how in children's shows there's LGBTQ stuff going on. Children's shows. None of this LGBTQ stuff existed in our children's shows back in our day. They never existed when we were in junior high and high school. But now it's all of a sudden, no, we have to push this LGBTQ stuff on children. This LGBTQ movement, it's made up of overwhelmingly majority of white people. They're the ones who make the majority of it. And it's promoted by white people often. Because, as I said, this is a Eurocentric ideology. There is a racial component to it. They are a minority, the LGBTQ, but they are replacing actual minorities now in the West. So we Muslims, we're in the West, we're in a minority, we are being replaced by LGBTQ people. Because society's favoring them now. Society's favoring white liberal people who want to have sex with the same gender, who want to identify as a different gender, who want to have a different pronoun. The Western society is favoring them. And it favors them because, as I said, LGBTQ, it's a white liberal ideology. In Yasser Ghadi's video on LGBTQ, it's a few years old, he says that this movement, it gained power. It gained so much power, momentum, because we live in a society where fornication and adultery, it's legal and it's encouraged. And this has led to perversions rising, such as LGBTQ. If you have a society and you legalize adultery and fornication and dating, well, LGBTQ is going to rise from that. They say that no one chooses their sexuality, no one chooses who they're attracted to. Okay, that's true. But this also goes for, straight people. We don't choose who we're attracted to. Sometimes it just happens. We don't choose our crushes, right? So does it mean we act on them? Does it mean we act on our crushes and we act on our desires? No. And what if we're married? Married people are attracted to other people all the time. Should they cheat on their spouses? It's such a weak argument when people say that we must support homosexuality because it isn't a choice. Because anyone can choose to act on their desires. Doesn't mean it's correct. Porn actors, they choose to act on their desires. So the whole purpose, of Islam and religions in general, it's about controlling yourself, controlling your desires. controlling your wishes. You're not supposed to explore your desires. You're not supposed to show it off to everyone. And you're not supposed to force it on others either. I honestly think Muslim sheikhs and scholars and imams, they need to speak a lot more about LGBTQ because it's everywhere now. It's literally everywhere. You can't. It's on TV. It's on billboards for advertisements. It's in businesses. It's everywhere. Never existed 10, 20 years ago. It never existed 10, 20 years ago in liberal places, but now it does. The LGBTQ movement, it's so sexual. Have you seen images of pride parades? Look how disgusting and sexual it is. My own city, this was in our local news, and it also happens in many other places. And it was covered in our local news. It's the news outlet. It's a more conservative outlet, so it covers it. And liberal outlets won't cover this at all. But our own Pride Parade here in my city, it had these men dressed up as women, and they have floats, right? Floats and parades shaped like genitalia. And there's kids around watching this too. Is this not child abuse? Is this not sexual abuse of children? And this is not the only place where this has happened. You can go on Matt Walsh's YouTube account and see where he also covers it. There's so much sexual content in LGBTQ parades. And there's children around there as well. Are diseases homophobic? There's so many sexually transmitted diseases that are so much higher among the gay community and bisexual men and quote unquote trans women. Why do diseases target them more often than other people? You know, there is an ongoing liberalization of medicine where they try to show that diseases affect everyone equally. It doesn't affect a certain group of people more. That's complete bullshit. The amount of diseases that exist among gay men and bisexual men, and it's all being pushed, it's all being watered down by the liberal agenda. And when I was in junior high, they started teaching us about sexual education. And I'm going to point out quickly that they never ever talked about homosexuality. They never, in our sexual education classes, they never talked about men having sex with men and women having sex with women. Because, as I said numerous times, 10, 20 years ago, homosexuality was still seen as abnormal. So in our sexual education classes, they talked about how anal intercourse is something that people should never do. Throughout my sexual education classes in junior high and high school, it was mandatory. You couldn't opt out of it. But they taught how anal intercourse is something that will just ruin you, how it's not normal. And that's actually one of the reasons probably why Islam doesn't allow anal intercourse. But you look at it now, sexual education courses, because, anal intercourse is how gay men and bisexual men, it's how they pleasure themselves. So all of that has been watered down. All the diseases they talked about that anal intercourse causes, all of the internal damage that anal intercourse can cause, that was taught to us in our sexual education classes, all that is gone, because we have to cater to these gay men. If you talk negatively about anal intercourse now, it's seen as homophobic. There is that website, Quora. It's a question and answer website. And I was browsing around on it, and I asked on there, I said, what are the risks and diseases that anal sex causes? So I typed it out and I pressed submit, and it was immediately flagged by the core administrators, and it was classified as hate speech. So they're saying, me asking question, what are the downsides of anal intercourse? And there's a lot, obviously. And me asking this, it was flagged as hate speech. It's flagged as hate speech because it's seen as discriminatory towards gay people. Still talking about sexual education in schools. You can, again, go on Matt Walsh and he'll talk about how they're teaching in sexual education classes for younger kids now in schools, and where they teach about anal intercourse and other kinds of homosexual ways to pleasure yourselves. Children are being taught this. I don't know how many videos I've seen of Matt Walsh covering this. I don't know how many videos I've seen of other very prominent people on social media cover this. The LGBTQ movement, it targets children and sexualizes children. This LGBTQ movement is the biggest fitna we have ever seen. There is no fitna greater than this. Our Muslim ancestors of 1400 years, they would be rolling in their graves if they somehow found out that LGBTQ is being taught and promoted everywhere. It's being targeted towards children. They'd be rolling in their graves. There is severe hypocrisy among atheists. They support LGBTQ, obviously, because atheists have no religion telling something that's immoral and wrong. So they support LGBTQ. And they oppose all criticism of LGBTQ. Because as I said, LGBTQ, it's such a protected community now. It's such a protected cult. It's such a protected perversion. And of course, the irreligious people, the secular people, the liberal people, and the atheist people. You can throw them all in one category. Obviously, they all support LGBTQ, and they all oppose criticism of LGBTQ. So yeah, they heavily support and promote LGBTQ, and they will not tolerate any criticism of them. But at the same time, these atheists will criticize and insult religion and people who follow religion. Like, do you see the hypocrisy right there? They will support LGBTQ and they will oppose all criticism of it, but they will criticize and insult religions like Islam and other religions, and they will criticize followers of religions for being backwards and being this and that. Do you see the hypocrisy right there? And have some logic here. The LGBTQ movement, it's really been in power for what, 5, 6, 7 years now, because for the past 5, 6, 7 years it's been pushed upon everyone. Prior to that, it was hardly visible. So atheists will support that, but they will oppose religion, which is thousands and thousands of years old. Like, where's the logic in that? You oppose religion. So I can talk about woke Muslims here. So woke liberal Muslims, they will support LGBTQ, but they will completely ignore the 1400 years of tradition and scholarship and customs that Islam teaches. Atheists and obviously woke liberal Muslims and secular Muslims, they're pro transgender, where kids can take medications and have surgeries to change their internal biological environment. Kids don't know right from wrong. How the hell is it okay for them to go under the knife and change their gender? Atheists and the secular Muslims and liberal Muslims, of course they support this. They say it's fine and it's somehow natural. How is it natural for you to surgically alter who you are? So they support all that, but at the same time they say religion is wrong. Do we change our internal biological environments when we believe in Islam and believe in religions in general? No, we don't. So why the hate on us? Aren't atheists all about the evidence and facts and science? And yet at the same time they support a perverted ideology where they mentally and physically change children. And another thing, how do atheists, if they're so pro science, how do they understand the fact that people with religion are more emotionally and psychologically healthy? This is a fact. You can Google it. Those who follow religion have more internal peace. They're more psychologically and emotionally well off. So what do atheists say about that? And what do atheists say, and woke Muslims and liberal Muslims as well? What do they say about the scientific studies that talk about the harms associated with putting puberty blockers into children and cutting off their genitals? These atheists and these woke Muslims and liberal Muslims, they say to keep religion to ourselves. They say don't force it on anyone. Okay? But then why is the LGBTQ ideology, forced upon us? this inclusive and diversity, these key words that are everywhere, they don't refer to racial and religious minorities anymore. They only refer to the LGBTQ community. Atheists are against religion in schools being, they're against religion being taught in schools. They don't want to quote unquote indoctrinate children. But when it comes to LGBTQ perverted ideology, they're okay with that. They want that. They want LGBTQ sexual content in children's books and libraries. They want LGBTQ perverted people being hired in schools. They want children to question their sexuality. They want them to question if they're a boy or a girl, or if they're non-binary or gender fluid. Atheists are fine with that. And of course, woke and liberal secular Muslims are also fine with that. But when it comes to teaching religion, when it comes to teaching Islam in schools, no, of course not. They're against that. Do you see the hypocrisy right there? Another thing is, these atheists, they say, they're only following the science. They say that we're supposed to believe in evolution because we can touch and see the evidence. That's what they say. Okay. So why can't they define what a man or a woman is? Like, doesn't science tell that? We can clearly see what a man and a woman is, right? The way they act and behave, and what body parts they have, both internally and externally. This is what makes a man and a woman. That's evidence right there, right? But they will reject that and say, nope, that's not evidence. Again, hypocrisy. Doesn't make sense to anyone here? You can also say that, atheists and liberal and secular Muslims, you can also say that, they're hypocrites on when they say marriage is an outdated institution. But at the same time, they will openly advocate for gays and lesbians and transgenders to get married. You can also say the same with abortion. So atheists and liberal and secular Muslims are pro-abortion. They say they're fine with aborting fetuses that show some kind of deformity. So what if technology showed us, it could predict the sexuality of the fetus as well? What if we aborted that? What if we aborted fetuses for that? Would that be wrong to them? Obviously, as Muslims, we should never abort fetuses. But I'm just trying to, show the hypocrisy here. For in the early 2000s up until the early mid 2010s, this was the height of Islamophobia. So there were so many Islamophobic websites and social media accounts. And they existed because they could, because these social media platforms said, all what they do is protected under free speech. But now, if you say anything against LGBTQ, you are banned. That's what happened to my Twitter account. I was baited into saying anti-LGBTQ content, and my Twitter account got permanently suspended. Meanwhile, Islamophobic accounts continue to operate. Why are these perverted people protected? And why is it that actual established religions, actual established traditions that religions promote, why is this not protected? Why is this openly allowed to be criticized and insulted? That's again hypocrisy by these social media outlets and their policies. Islamophobia is okay. Any criticism of gay men and gay women and transgenders and these pronoun fools, anything that if you go against them, then you're banned completely. And you don't even have to be harsh. You can politely and professionally say you oppose this and you are gone. You're cancelled. And if somehow your actual identity gets leaked, then you're fired from your job. But you can insult Muslims and Islam openly and you're fine. So what do liberal Muslims and secular Muslims have to say about this? What do these hypocrite atheists have to say about this? You know, in Canada now, thanks to this liberal government that we have, it's illegal to tell your child not to act on your homosexual desires. It's illegal to have religious people tell them that, you know, you can't engage in homosexuality. It's illegal now. It's also illegal to tell them that, you know, if you tell your child to not change your gender, to not change your pronouns, that is illegal now. There's some provinces in Canada that say children can do it privately in schools and they don't have to tell their parents. Again, sick, pathetic, disgusting LGBTQ ideology being pushed upon children. Where are the woke and liberal Muslims now? You know, when I was in elementary, you know, for Halloween, people would dress up, kids would dress up. And, you know, it'd be funny once in a while to see someone who would dress up as the opposite gender. So, it'd be funny if there was a boy in your class and he came dressed up as a girl for Halloween. It'd be funny, and everyone would know it's a joke. But now, if you do that, it's completely seen as normal and it's promoted. And if you criticize it, that's insensitive. You're being insensitive. This LGBTQ lobby that exists, it's sick how powerful they are. No group has achieved this much power in such little time. They even outdo the Israeli lobby in the West. LGBTQ is it's everywhere. They've made their presence known everywhere, and they're pushing it upon everyone. Anything you can name in LGBTQ content is there. You know, especially during the Pride Month, every commercial, oh my god, drag queens, men dressed in extravagant women's dresses and have so much makeup on. They look like freaks. And it's just promoted and pushed. A few months ago, our Prime Minister here in Canada, he joined a platform with drag queens. You know, these are men who dress up in women's dresses and put on crazy amounts of makeup They don't even look like normal. Firstly, they don't even look like women. No woman wears that much makeup. So these drag queens, they were joined by our Prime Minister Trudeau, and these drag queens, they gave a speech where they say, "Oh, they've been suppressed for so long. Their desires have been suppressed for so long." Yeah, because look at them. They're literal freaks. Every religion and civilization for the past 100,000 years, for however long humans have been around for, they've always suppressed any kind of abnormal, perverted desires like homosexuality. And the moment that these people were let out of the closet, and just a couple years ago, look at the havoc they've spread. I honestly believe, um, the Islamic concepts of Yajuj and Majuj. I honestly believe it refers to homosexual people because they are a cancer, and they're aggressively pushing their ideology on everyone. I swear there will be a wall, some kind, whether it's physical or digital in nature or something like that completely pushes away LGBTQ people from a civilized society. I honestly think there is an LGBTQ link to Yajuj and Majuj. Gog and Magog in English. In 2011, I was in grade 12. My biology book, it flat out said that there is a disagreement whether being gay is biological or personal choice. Now, you can't say that now. Because you can't say that being gay is a choice. So think about it. My liberal Canadian city, in my liberal school, full of liberal people, our textbook from a liberal institution said that, there's no agreement whether LGBTQ is choice or if it's genetic. In other words, it it can be classified as abnormal. And this is only in 2011. And you can't say this now. You can't say that anything close to this anymore. You have to say LGBTQ is natural. You have to say that it's natural, and you have to say that you have to support it, and you have to support children in this as well. You have to support children in their gay desires, which is being pushed by adult white liberal men mostly, and women. You know, because this LGBTQ movement is so prominent now, there's so many memories that I get. So when I was in grade 10, that would have been in the year 2009. When I think I was in grade 11 actually. In grade 11, so that would have been 2009, 2010. I remember I went to Costco with my mom. And when we are getting ready to pay at the cashier, we see a very feminine looking guy. Very feminine looking. It just didn't seem right seeing that. At that time, yeah, it was abnormal. Today, it's obviously normal. But back then, in 2009, 2010, it was seen as abnormal to see a man that's acting very feminine, with feminine gestures, feminine way he talks. And in front of us, there were 3 or 4 teen girls. They were teenagers, 16, 17, white. And as I said, we live in a very liberal city. They were making fun of him. the way he was. Why is that? Because back then, even though we live in a very liberal city, a very liberal society, back then it was abnormal to see such a person. It was abnormal to see such a man who acts very feminine, who has feminine hand gestures. You can always, even people who push LGBTQ ideology, you can always find anti LGBTQ stuff that they said previously. When I had my Facebook account, you know, I could, I can, I could clearly see these white people, white children, white high school teenagers, being very quote unquote homophobic. There's no way they'd be able to say that now. Because back then it was normal to be homophobic. It was normal to look down upon gay people and feminine men and women who acted like men. It was normal to make fun of them. It was normal to look down upon them. And I just see now how quickly society has changed. So, as I said, many pro LGBTQ people, they often have an anti LGBTQ past. So, for example, there's a very popular YouTube channel called the Young Turks. They're very liberal and secular, and I think everyone there is an atheist. I have a link to a video, and I'll link it in the description. So they're being transphobic. They are um, they're making fun of. I think this is the video where they're talking about Iran's women's soccer team, and the picture that it's not very clear, but looks like some of them actually look like men. It might just be how the photo is, but the Young Turks are talking about it, and the stuff that they're saying, it can be easily classified as transphobic today. So that just shows even the most liberal pro LGBTQ people, they have a homophobic past, they have a transphobic past, and they do it because, again, homosexuality and transsexuality, this was all seen as abnormal not even 10 years ago. These whitewashed, secularized, liberalized, woke Muslims, they're too stupid to realize that they're being colonized mentally. They're being colonized by these white liberal people whose ancestors came to our countries and colonized us and said we're abnormal and we're savage. And several generations down, we have these same white liberals telling Muslims that, hey, homosexuality is normal. And of course, these woke liberal Muslims believe it. They're being colonized all over again. Like, use your head. We were colonized, we were seen as abnormal, and now today, when we try to show our religion that, hey, Islam doesn't accept homosexuality, doesn't accept these LGBTQ lobby on children, these whitewashed, mentally colonized Muslims say, oh no, we have to, be more progressive and stuff like that. They're too stupid to see that they're being mentally colonized. The Diagnostic Statistics Manual, it's a psychiatric manual that's published every year in the US. And in the 70s, it classified homosexuality as a mental disorder. The smartest psychiatrists in the 70s classified homosexuality as a mental disorder. And I think up until the 90s, it classified transgender people as mentally unstable as well. But notice how both of those are gone. Obviously, medicine is being liberalized. There is a political agenda to liberalize medicine. There's so many woke liberal secular Muslims who celebrate that the fact that they're doctors or their sons and daughters are doctors. Ask them what a man and a woman is. Ask them the definition of it. Ask them if they give puberty blockers to children. If they do, and if they can't classify what a man and woman is, their medical degree is absolutely useless. Um, as I've mentioned, there's so many LGBTQ sexual organizations that indirectly promote pedophilia. Like, there's a website called Prostasia. It was featured in Matt Walsh's video. Look at their website. It literally talks about how these LGBTQ people, how they have these sexual desires towards children. How do they openly say this, by the way? I don't know how they openly say it. Where are child services agencies? Where's the police? Where's what's that guy's name? Chris Hansen from To Catch a Predator. Where is he? Why is he hiding from these LGBTQ people who are targeting children, who are sexualizing children? That the main argument for LGBTQ people is they say, oh, two consenting adults, they should be allowed to do whatever they want to. So okay, so if I'm married and I find someone and we're consenting to have sexual relations, is that okay? We're consenting, right? This two people consenting adult ideology does not make sense. We Muslims in the West, we are being used as a scapegoat by the LGBTQ and liberal community to advance their agenda. Yeah, homosexuality, it's a dysfunction of the brain. Is suicide the option? No. Doesn't mean it's natural? No. It would be natural if you could have if you could have children this way. I still believe that, despite the propaganda by the LGBTQ community and the liberal community, I still think that homosexuality is still seen unconsciously as abnormal by many people here in the West. Because even liberal people today, they'll still crack the occasional gay joke. You still see it in popular TV shows and movies today. You still see it. People still laugh at it. So why is that? It's because in their subconscious, most people still see LGBTQ as abnormal. So so why is like homosexuality and LGBTQ, why is it so widely accepted and promoted now? So when you have corporations, like these big multinational corporations, the same corrupt ones who buy politicians in Muslim countries, Um, they heavily promote LGBTQ, these promotions. Before they didn't. Okay, as I said, 20 years ago, did any of these businesses you see, did they ever have pride colors? No, they didn't. So these corporations, they promote it heavily, LGBTQ, and they do it for business reasons, not because they actually believe in it. And another reason why homosexuality is so popular now, it's seen as hypocritical now, because it's seen as hypocritical to oppose LGBTQ in society. It's because um, it's normal to have relations outside of marriage now. So another way to look at this is, people who are for legalizing marijuana. Those who want to legalize it, they say it's hypocritical not to because, alcohol is legal, and how is alcohol different than marijuana? It's the same thing, pretty much, right? So why not legalize marijuana? So that same argument can be used towards, homosexuality. It's normal to have relations outside of marriage now. So why not, um, you know, why oppose relations outside of marriage between people of the same gender? This is Yasser Ghali's argument that I mentioned earlier. When society legalizes, all this stuff outside of marriage, then obviously homosexualities naturally will arise. Yeah, I just want to quickly mention, on social media, I already mentioned it, how Islamophobic social media accounts, they are popular and no one does anything about it. Example is this Pamela Geller. I think she's kind of been sidelined a bit now, but she was a notorious Islamophobe before. She was banned from Twitter. She had her Twitter account for, 15, 16 years, where she said the most vile, disgusting things about Muslims. And if Twitter didn't block her for that. They blocked her recently because their reason was because she violated rules of election integrity. So in the 2020 election, the U.S. election, um, I think she supported the idea that the election was rigged to get Trump out of power, and she was blocked for that. She was not blocked for her 16, 17 years of saying the most vile things about Muslims. She wasn't blocked for that. So, it just shows the hypocrisy of these social media outlets. Saying anything against LGBTQ, you're banned completely, automatically. If you say that uh, Ellen Page is a woman, that's classified as hate speech. I tried to on Quora again. I tried to say, what did I say? I said, why does Ellen Page call herself a man or something like that? And immediately it was flagged. But say something about the Prophet Muhammad on Twitter, or on Quora and Twitter, and it's fine. Say something negative about him, it's fine. Accidentally misgender someone, or purposely even, you're banned. I think I'll end it here.